Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a doorway carved in limestone, descending into the cool shadows of a noblewoman's chamber along the Nile, where bronze mirrors catch the flicker of oil lamps, and the air hangs thick with frankincense. You can almost feel the smooth stone beneath your bare feet, hear the soft clink of ceramic jars being unstoppered, see the gleam of coal paste being ground on a marble pallet. This is ancient Egypt, not the Egypt of towering pyramids and golden death masks you've seen in documentaries, but the intimate, everyday Egypt where women transform their faces into works of art that could ward off evil, seduce gods, and announce their status before they spoke a single word. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why every depiction of Egyptian royalty shows those dramatic, elongated eyes, or what exactly Cleopatra bathed in that made Roman generals abandon empires. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, whether you're in bed in Boston or on a couch in Brisbane, or maybe just share what drew you to ancient beauty secrets in the first place. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You're standing in a bedroom in Thebes, circa 1500 BCE, watching a woman named Mutemwiya prepare for the day. She's not royalty. Her husband manages grain stores for a minor temple, but you'd never know it from the care she takes with her appearance. On a low wooden table before her sits an array that would make a modern makeup influencer weep with envy. Pallets of ground minerals, pots of oil, brushes made from reeds, and most importantly, 2 small vessels containing black and green powder. She reaches for the black first, adding a few drops of water to the powder in a shallow dish, then begins grinding with a smooth stone in circular motions that have worn a depression into the palette over years of use. This is coal, and it's about to define not just her eyes but her entire identity for the day ahead. The powder she's grinding contains galena, lead sulfide, mined from the mountains of the eastern desert, or imported from as far as Asia Minor. Sometimes it's mixed with soot from oil lamps, ground charcoal, or crushed almonds to adjust the texture. The green powder waiting beside it is malachite, a copper carbonate that produces a vivid emerald shade Egyptians favour for lower lid lines and inner corners. You watch her dip a small wooden applicator, tapered to a fine point, into the black paste and begin drawing a thick line along her upper lash line, extending it dramatically past the outer corner of her eye in a wing that points toward her temple. The application takes nearly 10 minutes per eye. She's not just putting on makeup, she's performing a ritual that connects her to Horus, the falcon-headed god whose own eyes represent the sun and moon. The distinctive almond shape she creates, pulled out and slightly upward, mimics the eye of Horus symbol that guards against evil throughout Egypt. Every woman, man, and child in this civilization wears coal, from the pharaoh in his palace to the farmer in his field. Its protection, its medicine, its beauty, and its identity all ground into one paste. But here's something that might surprise you. Modern analysis has revealed that ancient Egyptians were deliberately synthesizing lead-based compounds that don't occur naturally. In 2010, researchers at the Louvre examined 52 samples of ancient Egyptian cosmetics and found that the black coal contained lead chlorides, specifically phosgenite and laurionite, that required intentional chemical production. The Egyptians were actually manufacturing these compounds in small quantities, mixing lead with salt and natron, then heating and aging the mixture for days or weeks. Why go to such elaborate trouble? The lead compound stimulated the production of nitric oxide in skin cells around the eyes, boosting the immune system by up to 240% and helping fight off the eye infections that plagued a population living in a dusty, fly-ridden environment near stagnant water. So they were poisoning themselves to protect themselves, a paradox that will echo through this entire night's journey. Mutemwia doesn't know about lead toxicity or nitric oxide, but she knows that coal keeps her eyes healthy, that the days she forgets to apply it often end with itching and redness, that her grandmother lived to 60 with eyes still bright despite decades of daily application. She knows it works, even if she doesn't know why. Historians still argue whether the cosmetic or medicinal purpose came first. Did Egyptians notice that black minerals around the eyes prevented disease and then aestheticize the practice? Or did they develop the dramatic eye makeup for beauty and divine protection, only later recognizing its health benefits? We may never know, but we do know that medical papyri like the Ebers papyrus list coal as a treatment for various eye ailments, prescribed by physicians alongside incantations to Thoth. You notice that Mutemwia stores her coal in small containers with tight-fitting lids, some carved from stone, others moulded from faience, that gleaming blue-green glazed ceramic the Egyptians perfected. The wealthiest women own coal pots made of alabaster or even gold, shaped like palm columns or decorated with hieroglyphs. These aren't just storage, they're status symbols, often given as gifts between women or from husbands to wives. When archaeologists open tombs, they find these cosmetic containers placed carefully near the body, ensuring the deceased can maintain their appearance in the afterlife. One tomb of a young woman from the Middle Kingdom contained 14 coal pots, suggesting either remarkable vanity or, more likely, a collection built over a lifetime and cherished enough to accompany her into eternity. The application technique varies slightly across Egypt's 3,000-year history and its vast geography. In some periods and places, women prefer a thick line across both lids that meets at the outer corners. In others, like the New Kingdom era you're witnessing, the fashion leans toward that dramatic wing extending from the outer corner, sometimes reaching almost to the hairline. Men wear it too, though often with a subtler application. Priests apply it before entering temples. Soldiers wear it to reduce sun glare, the same reason modern athletes use eye black. And children have it painted on by their mothers to protect against the evil eye and the very real threat of conjunctivitis. There's something hypnotic about watching Mutemwia work. The way her hand moves with practiced certainty, how she pauses to check her reflection in a polished copper mirror, tilting her face to catch the light. The mirror itself is a remarkable object, a disc of copper or bronze polished to a shine that captures images with surprising clarity, attached to a handle often carved to represent a papyrus stem or the goddess Hathor. Looking into these ancient mirrors was like looking into a slightly dimmed, golden-tinted world, where your reflection wavered with a dreamlike quality that seemed appropriate for an object that showed you not just how you looked, but how you wanted to be seen. Do you remember the last time you spent this much time on just your eyes? In our world of 5-minute makeup routines and swipe-on beauty, there's something almost meditative about the deliberation ancient Egyptian women brought to this single feature. Mutemwia will spend more time on her eyes than on the rest of her face and body combined, because in Egyptian aesthetic philosophy, the eyes aren't just windows to the soul. They're the soul's primary means of projection, the feature that communicates power, health, divinity, and desirability before any other signal can register. The sun climbs higher outside Mutemwia's window, and you watch her reach for a different sort of preparation. A shallow bowl filled with what looks like rust-coloured mud. but when she stirs it with her finger, you catch the earthy, slightly bitter scent of crushed henna leaves. This is a beauty secret that predates even the pyramids, reaching back into prehistory when someone along the Nile first noticed that the leaves of the Lawsonia inermis plant, when dried and ground and mixed with liquid, left a deep orange-red stain on whatever they touched. That discovery changed everything about how Egyptians, and later, cultures across Africa, the Middle East and Asia, decorated their bodies. You're witnessing a ritual that connects Mutemwia to every woman in her lineage stretching back centuries. Her mother taught her the proper consistency, thick enough to cling but thin enough to spread, achieved by mixing the powder with water, lemon juice, or sometimes tea brewed from the leaves themselves. The paste sits in its bowl, darkening as it oxidizes, releasing that distinctive smell that's somehow both pleasant and sharp, herbal and metallic all at once. Henna has been found in mummies from the pre-dynastic period, staining the hair and nails of bodies over 5,000 years old, proving that this practice is older than writing itself in Egypt. She starts with her fingernails, painting the paste carefully over each one, extending slightly onto the skin around the nail bed. The application is messy. Henna doesn't cooperate like modern nail polish, and she has to work quickly before it begins to dry. In a few hours, when she washes the dried paste away, her nails will glow with a deep reddish orange that won't fade for weeks, a colour associated with vitality, fertility, and the life-giving power of blood itself. The wealthy women of the court take this further, mixing their henna with ground minerals to shift the colour toward burgundy or even purple, though Mutemwia is content with the traditional shade that has decorated Egyptian fingers for millennia. But henna does more than beautify. It protects. The Lawson compound in henna has natural antifungal and antibacterial properties, making it an ideal treatment for nails in a climate where fungal infections thrive. It also provides a mild sunscreen effect when applied to skin, with some UV protective qualities that offer small but measurable defense against Egypt's relentless sun. Once again, you see the pattern. Egyptian beauty practices emerge from a sophisticated understanding of what worked, even if the biochemical mechanisms wouldn't be understood for thousands of years. After her nails, Mutemwia moves to her palms, spreading a thinner layer of henna across both hands in patterns that mark her as a married woman of respectable status. Some cultures that adopted henna use it for elaborate decorative designs. The intricate Mendi patterns of South Asia won't develop for centuries yet, but Egyptian application tends towards simpler, more symbolic coverage. Full palms and soles stained red, fingertips deepened to near brown, sometimes decorative bands around wrists and ankles. The soles of the feet receive special attention. A woman with hennaed feet is a woman who doesn't labour in the fields, who can afford to stain her soles knowing they won't be immediately dirtied by work. Historians still argue whether henna reached Egypt from Asia or Africa, or whether it was discovered independently by multiple cultures who noticed the same plant growing in their environments. The Lawsonia inermis shrub thrives in hot, dry climates, and it grows wild in parts of Egypt. But some scholars believe the practice may have been imported from Nubia or from the lands east of the Red Sea. What's certain is that by the New Kingdom period you're witnessing, henna is as Egyptian as the Nile itself, integrated into the culture so thoroughly that life without it would seem unthinkable. You notice that Mutemwia has also prepared a second bowl, this one containing henna mixed with indigo powder to create a darker, almost black paste. This is for her hair, which she'll treat once her hands are finished. The combination of henna and indigo has been used for thousands of years to darken hair and cover grey, producing shades ranging from deep auburn to true black depending on the ratio and the original hair colour. She sections her hair carefully, painting the paste onto her scalp and working it through the strands, the process taking nearly an hour of patient application. While she works, you might find yourself wondering, did ancient Egyptian women actually have fun with this? The answer, glimpsed through tomb paintings and written accounts, is absolutely yes. Beauty preparation was a social activity, something women did together, with servants and daughters and sisters gathered in the same room, talking and laughing while henna dried on their hands and oil soaked into their hair. The wealthy held beauty parties, gatherings where women would spend an entire day applying treatments to each other, sharing recipes, gossiping about whose husband had been seen with which servant girl, whose son had impressed which general. It was bonding, entertainment, and self-care all rolled into one long leisurely ritual. The cooling effect of henna provides relief from heat too. When the paste is wet on your skin, it draws warmth away, creating a sensation of coolness that persists even after it dries. In a civilization without air conditioning, without even the concept of ice beyond what might form on a winter night, any substance that made you feel cooler was precious beyond measure. So women would apply henna not just for colour but for comfort, painting it on their feet before bed so they could sleep more easily through sweltering summer nights. Here's a quirky detail that rarely makes it into documentaries. Henna was also used on animals. Wealthy Egyptians would apply henna to the hooves and manes of their horses, the claws of their cats, even the shells of their pet turtles. It marked these animals as beloved, as property of someone with enough leisure and resources to beautify their beasts. Imagine a chariot pulled by horses with hennaed hooves, the colour flashing with each step. It's the ancient equivalent of a luxury car with a custom paint job. The medical applications extended beyond antifungal properties. Henna was prescribed for headaches when applied as a paste to the temples, for cooling fevers when spread on the palms and soles, for treating skin conditions when mixed with other herbal ingredients. The Ebers Papyrus mentions it in several remedies, and other medical texts describe its use for everything from insect bites to arthritis pain. Whether all these applications actually worked is debatable, but the cooling sensation alone probably provided psychological relief that manifested as physical comfort. Do you remember we talked about the paradox of lead-in coal, poison as protector? Henna presents the opposite, a substance that's almost entirely beneficial, one of the few ancient cosmetics that modern dermatologists would actually endorse. Pure henna, the kind Mutemwia is using, causes virtually no adverse reactions in most people. It's plant-based, it washes away naturally as skin cells shed and nails grow, and it leaves behind no toxic residue. If anything, it improves the health of whatever it touches. It's the rare, ancient beauty practice that we've never needed to update or replace, still used today in essentially the same form it took 5,000 years ago. As Mutemwia waits for the henna on her hair to process, it needs at least 2 hours to develop its full colour. She wraps her head in linen to keep the paste moist and warm, which intensifies the dye. She moves carefully to avoid smudging the henna on her hands, which is still wet and vulnerable. This waiting period is built into the rhythm of an Egyptian woman's day. You plan around it, using the time for tasks that don't require full use of your hands. Some women pray, some supervise servants, some simply sit in the shade and let their minds wander while their bodies transform, molecule by molecule, into their ideal selves. The afternoon light slants through the high window, and you follow Mutemwia to a different chamber where steam rises from a large basin carved from limestone. The water inside looks cloudy, almost opaque, with a faint sweet smell cutting through the humidity. She's prepared a bath, but not with water alone. This is milk, gallons of it, mixed with honey and salt, perhaps the most famous beauty treatment in all of ancient Egypt. You're about to discover whether Cleopatra's legendary bathing habits were pure mythology or rooted in practices that actually worked. First, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the queen in the bath. Did Cleopatra really bathe in donkey milk? The historical record suggests yes, though the details have been exaggerated through centuries of retelling. Ancient sources, including Pliny the Elder, writing just decades after her death, mention that she travelled with a herd of 700 donkeys specifically to provide milk for her daily baths. Whether the number is accurate or inflated, the practice itself was well established among Egyptian elite long before Cleopatra adopted it. You're watching Mutemwia, a woman of modest means, use cow's milk because donkey milk costs far more, about 4 times the price. But the principle remains identical. She steps into the bath carefully, lowering herself into liquid that's been warmed in the sun, not hot enough to scald, but warm enough to open pores and relax muscles. The sensation must be extraordinary. Milk creates a different texture than water alone, slightly thicker, coating the skin rather than simply wetting it. The lactic acid in milk is a natural alpha-hydroxy acid, the same category of chemical exfoliant that modern dermatologists recommend for improving skin texture and reducing fine lines. As Mutemwia soaks, that acid is gently dissolving the bonds between dead skin cells on her body's surface, sloughing away the accumulated dust and dried sweat of Egyptian life. The honey serves multiple purposes beyond making the bath smell pleasant. It's a humectant, meaning it draws moisture from the air into the skin, and it has antimicrobial properties that help prevent infection in any small cuts or abrasions. Ancient Egyptians recognized honey as both food and medicine. Medical papyri prescribe it for wounds, burns, and digestive ailments. In the bath, it dissolves partially into the milk, creating a solution that leaves skin feeling soft and faintly sticky until rinsed. A stickiness that, paradoxically, makes you feel cleaner somehow, as if something beneficial has been deposited on your skin rather than merely removed from it. Historians still argue whether these milk baths were primarily cosmetic or therapeutic. Some scholars point to the fact that they're mentioned in medical texts alongside treatments for skin diseases, suggesting they were prescribed for conditions like psoriasis or eczema. Others note that tomb paintings show milk baths in contexts of luxury and pleasure, with servants pouring pitchers of milk over reclining noble women while musicians play. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in between. Egyptians didn't separate medicine and beauty the way we do, seeing them instead as 2 aspects of the same pursuit of maintaining Mayat, the cosmic balance and order that included a healthy, attractive body. You watch Mutemwia use a cloth to scrub her skin while submerged, not roughly but with firm, circular motions that help the lactic acid work its magic. She pays special attention to her elbows, knees and heels, the places where skin thickens and roughens most quickly under Egyptian sun and sand. After about 20 minutes, she steps out and has a servant pour clean water over her to rinse away the milk residue, though some women prefer to let it dry on their skin, believing the remaining film provides continued benefit throughout the day. But here's where it gets interesting from a modern scientific perspective. Research published in the International Journal of Dermatology found that milk proteins can actually penetrate the outer layer of skin and promote collagen production, potentially reducing the appearance of wrinkles and improving skin elasticity. The same study noted that milk fat provides essential fatty acids that help repair the skin barrier. So when Roman writers mocked Egyptian women for their elaborate beauty rituals, calling them vain and excessive, those women were actually engaging in dermatologically sound practices that wouldn't be fully understood or validated until the 21st century. The salt in the bath, usually natron, that miraculous mineral Egyptians mined from dried lake beds, serves as both exfoliant and preservative. Natron is a mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, and sodium sulfate, and it's the same substance used in mummification. In the bath, it helps the other ingredients work more effectively by adjusting the pH and creating a slightly alkaline environment that softens skin. It also has antiseptic properties, killing bacteria and preventing the milk itself from spoiling too quickly. Yes, you read that correctly. They bathed in the same substance used to preserve corpses, and it made them more beautiful, not less. The Egyptians understood that the line between life and death, between preservation and decay, was thinner than most cultures imagined. Do you remember ever taking a bath that lasted more than 10 minutes in our modern world? The ancient Egyptian beauty bath was an event that consumed hours. After the milk soak, there might be an oil application, then another rinse, then a massage, then scented unguents worked into the skin. Mutemwiya, even with her relatively modest resources, will spend the rest of her afternoon moving through these stages, each one building on the last, creating layers of treatment that sink progressively deeper into her skin. The economics of milk baths reveal something fascinating about Egyptian society. Milk was valuable. It required maintaining animals, which required land and labour and expertise. Using it for bathing rather than drinking or making cheese was a deliberate sacrifice, a statement that beauty mattered enough to justify the expense. Yet the practice existed across multiple economic strata, suggesting that Egyptian culture genuinely valued personal grooming as something worth investing in, not just for royalty but for anyone who could afford it. There's evidence of middle-class women saving for months to purchase enough milk for a single elaborate bath before a wedding or important festival. Some women added other ingredients based on family recipes passed down through generations. Ground almonds for extra exfoliation, rose petals for fragrance, even wine in some cases for its astringent properties. Each household had its own variation, its own secret ratio that mothers taught daughters, creating a diversity of practice within the common framework. When archaeologists examine residue in ancient bathing vessels, they find traces of dozens of different substances, suggesting a rich culture of experimentation and customization. The frequency of milk baths varied by wealth and occasion. A woman like Mutemwiya might indulge monthly, while queens bathed in milk daily or even twice daily. Common women might experience it only a few times in their lives, for weddings and major religious festivals, but everyone knew about it. Everyone aspired to it, and everyone recognized a woman who had recently enjoyed one by the distinctive glow of her skin, a luminosity that water alone couldn't achieve. There's something almost magical about watching Mutemwiya emerge from her bath transformed, her skin gleaming with a softness that catches the light differently than it did hours ago. She looks younger somehow, as if the bath has turned back time by weeks or months. Modern cosmetologists might explain this through hydration levels and exfoliation, but the Egyptian understanding was simpler and perhaps truer. She has washed away the accumulated weariness of living, emerging renewed, closer to the divine ideal of eternal youth that the gods themselves embodied. As evening approaches and the heat begins its reluctant retreat, you notice something peculiar being prepared in the corner of Mutemwiya's chamber. A servant is working with what appears to be a cone of wax about the size of a small fist, mixing into it drops of fragrant oil until the white substance darkens and releases waves of scent. Myrrh, perhaps, or cinnamon, or lotus flower essence. This is a perfume cone, one of the most distinctive and frankly bizarre beauty practices in all of ancient Egypt, and you're about to watch it being placed directly on top of a woman's head, where it will slowly melt throughout the evening's festivities. Let's be clear about what's happening here. Mutemwia is preparing to attend a banquet at the home of a minor official, and as part of her formal attire she will balance a cone of scented wax on her elaborately styled wig, where it will gradually liquefy in the warmth of the evening, dripping perfumed oil down over her hair, face and shoulders for hours. If this sounds uncomfortable, impractical, and potentially disastrous for clothing, you're absolutely right. It was all of those things. But in the strange alchemy of Egyptian aesthetics, discomfort often equaled elegance, and the willingness to endure beauty's demands demonstrated character as much as wealth. The cones were made primarily from animal fat, usually beef or mutton tallow, mixed with beeswax to adjust the melting point and prevent too rapid liquefaction. Into this base, perfumers would incorporate precious oils and resins, myrrh from Punt, frankincense from Arabia, cinnamon from distant lands to the east, lotus oil extracted from thousands of flowers gathered at dawn when their scent was strongest, lily essence, and sometimes even spikenard, that legendary perfume mentioned in biblical texts that cost more per ounce than gold. The result was a portable, time-release fragrance delivery system that announced your presence before you entered a room and lingered after you departed. You watched the servant place the cone carefully atop Mutemwia's wig, which has been styled in an elaborate arrangement of braids and curls that provides a stable platform for the waxy sculpture. The wig itself is another marvel, made from human hair, sometimes supplemented with plant fibres or sheep's wool, dyed black and stiffened with beeswax and resin into shapes that defy gravity. The perfume cone sits at the crown like a strange hat, visible to everyone, marking her as someone who can afford not just expensive fragrances, but the elaborate preparation required to wear them in this particular fashion. But here's where the historical mystery deepens. We're not entirely certain these perfume cones existed as functional objects. You see them constantly in tomb paintings and reliefs, perched atop the heads of banquet guests, musicians and dancers. They appear so frequently across so many centuries that their existence seems undeniable, yet archaeologists have never found a single actual example. Not one. No preserved cone in any tomb, no residue that definitively proves their use, no written instructions for their manufacture or application. Historians still argue whether they were real objects or symbolic representations of fragrance and luxury. A visual shorthand in Egyptian art meaning, "this person smells amazing," rather than a literal depiction of what people wore. Some scholars suggest that the cones in artwork represent spiritual perfume, the divine scent that surrounded blessed individuals, made visible in art the way halos make Christian saints' holiness visible. Others propose that the cones were real but rare, used only for the most elite occasions by the wealthiest individuals, explaining why none have survived. Perhaps they were too precious to bury even with the dead. A third camp argues that the cones existed but functioned differently than we imagine, perhaps placed near guests rather than on them, or worn briefly for ceremonial moments rather than throughout entire events. For tonight's journey, we're taking the position that some form of perfume cone was real and functional, because the alternative, that Egyptians spent 3,000 years painting imaginary objects on their art, seems less likely than our simply not having found archaeological evidence yet. After all, we didn't believe Troy existed until Schliemann dug it up. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially in a civilization where so much organic material has been lost to time and desert. Assuming they existed, imagine wearing one. The initial weight on your head, the constant awareness of balance required to prevent it toppling, the first warm trickle of scented oil sliding down your scalp, behind your ear, along your neck. The smell would be overwhelming at first, concentrated and almost medicinal, but as the oil spread and warmed against your skin, it would develop complexity, the different notes emerging at different times as they oxidized and mixed with your body's natural chemistry. By the end of an evening, you'd be drenched, not just perfumed, but actually wet with fragrant oil, your clothing stained, your wig heavy with accumulated liquid. Do you remember the last time you wore a fragrance that lasted more than a few hours? Modern perfumes, for all their sophistication, fade relatively quickly, their volatile compounds evaporating into air within hours of application. The perfume cone solved this problem through brute force. It just kept releasing more scent, maintaining intensity through sheer volume. It was the opposite of subtle, a statement that you had so much access to luxury that you could literally waste it, letting precious oils drip onto the floor where they'd be trampled and lost. The social implications were fascinating. At a banquet, you could gauge the evening's progression by looking at the guests' cones, whose had melted most, who had arrived earliest, who'd been seated in the warmest spot near the braziers. The cones created a kind of temporal record of the party, a visible countdown that added urgency to entertainment and conversation. And when a cone finally melted completely, it marked a natural transition point, a sign that perhaps it was time to leave or time for the entertainment to change. There's also a practical consideration that rarely gets mentioned. Egypt was hot, and Egyptians' primary experience with ice or coolness was minimal. The sensation of anything cold on your skin was precious and rare, but the melting wax paradoxically felt cooling as it liquefied, as the phase change from solid to liquid drew heat from your scalp. The evaporation of the perfume oils provided additional cooling through the same mechanism that makes sweating effective. So the perfume cone wasn't just fragrance, it was also a primitive air conditioning system, making bearers more comfortable even as it made them more beautiful. The symbolism ran deeper than mere luxury. In Egyptian religious thought, pleasant scents were associated with divine presence. The gods smelled of incense and myrrh, and by surrounding yourself with these fragrances, you moved closer to the divine realm. The perfume cone positioned at the crown of the head where the ka, the spiritual double, was thought to enter and exit the body, marked that spot as a portal between human and divine. You weren't just making yourself smell nice, you were creating a bridge to the sacred. Some tomb paintings show servants refreshing guests' cones partway through festivities, replacing depleted ones with fresh applications. This suggests that at elaborate banquets hosted by the truly wealthy, multiple cones might be used in a single evening, ensuring that the fragrance never diminished, that the cooling never stopped, that the visible marker of status remained prominent throughout the entire event. Its excess elevated to art form, conspicuous consumption, made literal as precious substances literally melt away before witnesses. The following morning you find yourself back in Mutemuia's chamber as she prepares for a different sort of occasion. A temple ceremony where she'll assist in offerings to Hathor, goddess of beauty and love. Today requires different face than yesterday's banquet demanded, and you watch as she reaches for new palettes and pots arrayed on her cosmetic table. The kohl remains essential, of course, but now she adds colour to her cheeks and lips, transforming her face from elegant to radiant with the application of pigments that humans have been grinding into powder since the dawn of civilization itself. She starts with ochre, that miraculous iron oxide clay that appears in shades ranging from pale yellow to deep rust red depending on its iron content and the temperature at which it was heated. The ochre she's selected today is a warm reddish brown, mined from deposits in the Western Desert, where ancient Egyptians quarried it alongside the precious stones they valued. She mixes the powder with a few drops of animal fat, rendered from cattle probably, though wealthy women might use more exotic fats from hippopotamus or crocodile, creating a cream that spreads smoothly across her cheekbones. The application technique is more subtle than you might expect. She doesn't aim for the obvious circles of colour you see in tomb paintings, which are artistic conventions exaggerating the blush for visibility rather than realistic depictions. Instead, she blends the ochre upward from the apple of her cheek toward her temples, creating a lifted appearance that makes her face look younger, more alert, more alive. The colour she's left with is earthy and natural, as if she's just come in from brisk exercise rather than sitting still in a dim room applying ancient cosmetics. But ochre does more than beautify, it protects. Iron oxide provides a degree of sun protection, acting as a physical barrier that reflects UV radiation away from skin. It's not nearly as effective as modern sunscreen, but in a civilization that spent most of its time outdoors under a sun that could kill through heat stroke and melanoma, any protection was valuable protection. The Egyptians didn't understand ultraviolet radiation, but they understood that covering skin with ochre meant less burning, less damage, less of the leathery premature aging that marked the faces of those who laboured unprotected in the fields. Historians still argue whether Egyptian face paint was intended primarily as cosmetic enhancement or ritual marking. The colours carried symbolic weight, red associated with life, blood and vitality, yellow with gold and the eternal sun, white with purity and the bones that remained after death. When a woman painted her face, was she making herself beautiful or making herself sacred? The answer, as with so much in Egyptian culture, is probably both simultaneously, the categories too intertwined to separate. For her lips, Mutemwia reaches for a different preparation entirely, a mixture that makes your modern sensibilities recoil slightly when you learn what's in it. She's grinding carmine, a brilliant red pigment derived from the crushed bodies of cochineal insects, tiny creatures that live on cactus plants and whose dried, powdered corpses produce the most intense red dye nature offers. It takes approximately 70,000 insects to make a single pound of carmine, which is why the colour costs so much, and why only the relatively wealthy can afford to paint their lips this particular shade of crimson. The carmine is mixed with fat, and sometimes a bit of beeswax to create a salve that she applies with her finger, pressing the colour into her lips and slightly beyond their natural border to create a fuller appearance. The result is dramatic. Her lips now echo the reddish ochre on her cheeks, creating colour harmony across her face that makes her features appear more balanced, more deliberate, more designed. She looks like someone who has made choices about how she presents herself to the world, which in ancient Egypt as in modern times is a form of power. Some women use alternative red pigments, red ochre for those who can't afford carmine, or in rare cases cinnabar, that toxic mercury sulfide compound that produces the most brilliant red imaginable, while slowly poisoning anyone who uses it regularly. Cinnabar lip colour is fashionable among certain court circles during some dynasties, despite, or perhaps because of, the danger it represents. Beauty and risk have always been intimate companions, and the Egyptian willingness to flirt with poison for the sake of appearance would echo through history into the lead-painted faces of Elizabethan England and the arsenic-complexion wafers of Victorian America. For variety, some women prefer a more orange-toned lip, achieved by mixing red pigments with yellow ochre, or even a purple shade created by adding a touch of ground manganese dioxide to the carmine. The lip colour you wear announces your status, your taste, your alignment with current fashion versus traditional values. Conservative women, especially older matrons, often eschew lip colour entirely or use only the subtlest stain. Younger women, courtesans, and those seeking to attract attention favour the boldest shades. Temple priestesses occupy a middle ground, their lip colour bright enough to be seen from a distance during ceremonies but not so vivid as to suggest worldly vanity. You notice that Mutimwea is also applying a light dusting of yellow ochre to her forehead and the bridge of her nose, creating highlights that catch the light and make her face appear more three-dimensional. This is sophisticated colour theory in action. The interplay of warm and cool tones, light and dark areas, creating depth and dimension on a human face thousands of years before European painters would formalize these principles in oil on canvas. Egyptian women were walking, breathing works of art, their faces carefully composed to create specific emotional and aesthetic effects. Do you remember when contouring became a viral makeup trend in the 2010s? Ancient Egyptians were contouring 3,000 years earlier, using the same principle, adding darkness to areas you want to recede, adding light to areas you want to project forward. They understood that faces are three-dimensional sculptures, and that colour can enhance or diminish any feature if applied with sufficient skill and intention. Here's a quirky detail that rarely appears in museum exhibits. Egyptian women would sometimes mix their cheek and lip colours with plant-based ingredients that had a plumping effect, causing temporary swelling that made lips appear fuller and cheeks more prominent. One recipe found in a later Greco-Egyptian medical text calls for mixing pigments with ground fenugreek seeds and honey, creating a paste that both colours and irritates the skin just enough to cause mild inflammation. The result was a bee-stung lip centuries before Angelina Jolie made the look fashionable, though the Egyptians achieved it through controlled allergic reaction rather than cosmetic injection. The staying power of these ancient cosmetics is remarkable when you consider the technology available. The fat-based formulas would have melted somewhat in Egypt's heat, requiring periodic reapplication, but the pigments themselves stained skin sufficiently that morning application could last through an entire day with only minor touch-ups. Women carried small pots of their face paints when travelling, keeping them in cosmetic kits made of wood or basket weave, along with small bronze mirrors and the various applicators needed for precision work. You step into a workshop in Thebes where the air is thick with the smell of beeswax and something indefinably human. The scent of hair, thousands and thousands of strands of it, hanging in bundles from the rafters, spread across tables, being sorted by workers whose fingers move with the automatic precision of long practice. This is a wig maker's establishment, and you're about to discover that the elaborate headdresses adorning every Egyptian tomb painting and statue weren't born perfect from sculptors' imaginations. They were manufactured objects, luxury goods that required vast amounts of labour, materials and expertise to produce. The sheer scale of Egypt's wig culture cannot be overstated. In a civilization where most adults, both men and women, shaved their heads for cleanliness and cooling in the relentless heat, wigs weren't merely fashion accessories, they were essential social equipment, as necessary as clothing for anyone venturing into public space. To appear without a wig in formal settings was roughly equivalent to appearing naked, a breach of propriety so severe it could mark you as insane, criminal, or hopelessly poor. So wigs had to be produced constantly, in vast quantities, to meet the demands of a population that owned multiple examples the way modern people own multiple pairs of shoes. You watch a master craftsman examining a length of human hair, holding it up to the light streaming through a high window, checking for quality. The best wigs use human hair exclusively, preferably from young women whose hair has never been damaged by excessive sun or harsh treatments. This hair is bought, traded, and occasionally stolen, creating an entire economy around human hair as commodity. Women growing their hair long can sell it at market, receiving enough payment to buy food for a week or clothing for a season. Slaves' hair is claimed by owners. The hair of the dead is sometimes harvested before burial, though this practice is controversial, and many consider it disrespectful to the deceased's journey into the afterlife. For less expensive wigs, the hair is mixed with or entirely replaced by plant fibers, palm leaf strips, date palm fiber, or flax, all dyed black or dark brown to mimic natural hair colour. These wigs are heavier, coarser, less comfortable, and they mark the wearer as someone of modest means. But they're still wigs, still providing the essential coverage and formality that Egyptian social norms demand. Even peasants who own nothing else might own one simple palm fibre wig for temple visits and funerals. The construction process is meticulous and time-consuming. The craftsman you're watching has before him a base made of woven fibres forming a cap that will fit snugly against the wearer's shaved head. Into this base, he's attaching hair in small bunches, working from the nape of the neck upward, using beeswax heated to just the right temperature to be pliable, but not liquid. Each small section of hair is dipped in wax, then pressed against the cap base and held until the wax cools and hardens. Row by row, the wig takes shape, and you begin to understand why good wigs cost so much. A single piece might represent hundreds of hours of labour. The styles vary dramatically by period, gender, and social status. The Middle Kingdom favoured shorter, more practical styles for both men and women. The New Kingdom, the era you're witnessing, tends toward longer, more elaborate constructions with braids, curls, and complex arrangements that defy gravity through the strategic use of wax and resin as hair gel and setting agent. Some wigs feature hundreds of tiny braids, each one individually constructed. Others have rows of rigid curls that stand out from the head like a corona. The most elaborate examples include gold threads woven through the hair, beads attached to braid ends, and even small decorative elements like carved flowers or scarab beetles. Historians still argue whether Egyptians wore these elaborate wigs daily, or reserved them for special occasions, with simpler styles for everyday wear. Tomb paintings show people wearing complex wigs in all sorts of settings: banquets, religious ceremonies, work scenes, domestic moments. But artistic convention might not reflect reality. Some scholars suggest that the grandest wigs were ceremonial objects, owned by temples or wealthy families and loaned to individuals for specific events, explaining how even middle-class Egyptians could appear in elaborate hair in formal portraits, despite probably not owning such expensive pieces personally. The maintenance of wigs requires its own set of skills and products. They need regular cleaning, a delicate process involving warm water with natron dissolved in it, careful scrubbing to remove accumulated oils and dirt without damaging the wax adhesive holding everything together. They need reconditioning, reapplication of oils to keep the hair, whether human or plant-based, supple and glossy. They need repairs, individual sections coming loose and needing to be rewaxed, damage from insects that find the organic material attractive, splits and tears in the base cap that need mending. Wealthy families employ servants specifically for wig care. These specialists understand which oils work best for which materials, how to reshape curls that have fallen flat, how to touch up the black dye that fades with sun exposure. They're part hairdresser, part conservator, maintaining objects that might represent a substantial portion of a family's wealth. A good wig, properly maintained, could last for decades and be passed down through generations, appearing at weddings and funerals of children and grandchildren of the original owner. Do you remember the last time you spent serious money on your hair? Maybe a few $100s at an expensive salon. A quality human hair wig in ancient Egypt could cost the equivalent of several months' wages for a skilled worker. The most elaborate examples, those worn by royalty and the highest nobility, might cost as much as a house. They weren't just clothing, they were investments, status symbols, heirlooms. There's something almost poignant about the way Egyptians used wigs to create the illusion of hair they deliberately removed. They shaved for practical reasons, lice control, cooling, cleanliness. But they couldn't abandon the deep human association between hair and beauty, between covered heads and civilization, between styled hair and social identity. So they created artificial hair, often more beautiful and certainly more controllable than natural hair could ever be, and in doing so revealed a profound truth about human nature. We are the species that refuses to accept our bodies as given, that insists on transformation, on improvement, on the creation of ideal selves that exist somewhere between nature and art. The dyes used to colour wigs and maintain their blackness were themselves sophisticated chemical preparations. Henna could darken brown to auburn or deep red. Indigo produced blue-black shades. A mixture of both created true black. For the deepest, richest blacks, wig makers might use a preparation involving crushed gall nuts mixed with iron salts, a recipe that wouldn't be out of place in a 19th century chemistry laboratory. These dyes had to be carefully formulated to colour the hair without destroying the wax adhesive or weakening the plant fibres in the less expensive wigs. The sun hasn't yet risen when you enter the bathing chamber of a priest's household, watching figures move in the pre-dawn dimness as they prepare for a ritual that defines Egyptian concepts of purity, beauty, and readiness to approach the sacred. Today you're witnessing something that might make modern observers uncomfortable: the systematic removal of every hair from the human body except for eyebrows, and the hair on top of the head, which, as you now know, will be covered by a wig anyway. This is shaving as spiritual practice, as beauty ritual, as medical procedure, as social requirement, all rolled into one careful scraping of bronze blade against skin. The man you're watching is methodical, starting with his face despite having only minimal facial hair. Egyptians tend toward less body hair than many populations, but what grows must be removed. He's using a bronze razor, a curved blade about 4 inches long attached to a wooden handle, and he sharpened it carefully on a whetstone before beginning. Bronze doesn't hold an edge as well as steel, which won't be widely available for another 1,000 years, so the blade has been honed with patience and skill to achieve the sharpness necessary to cut hair without tearing skin. There's no shaving cream, no foam, nothing between blade and face except a thin film of oil, castor oil probably, or moringa, applied to lubricate the blade's passage and protect against nicks. You watch him work by feel as much as sight, the bronze mirror beside him catching just enough lamplight to show general areas but not fine detail. Each stroke is cautious, controlled, the blade held at precisely the right angle to cut hair without cutting flesh. It's a skill learned in childhood and practiced daily through adulthood, as natural and necessary as eating or sleeping. After his face, he moves to his head, shaving away the stubble that's grown since his last full shaving a few days ago. This is more challenging. The curve of the skull, the delicate area around the ears, the back of the head where you can't see what you're doing. He moves slowly, one hand feeling ahead of the blade, mapping the territory, the other following with the razor. Occasionally he pauses to wipe the blade on a cloth, removing accumulated hair and oil, then dips it in water to rinse before continuing. But the shaving doesn't stop with head and face. Egyptian standards of beauty and purity demand the removal of body hair from everywhere: arms, legs, chest, back, and most critically, the pubic area and underarms. This total depilation serves multiple purposes that you're beginning to recognize as characteristic of Egyptian beauty practices. It's simultaneously aesthetic, medical, and spiritual, with no clear boundary between categories. The aesthetic appeal is obvious. Smooth skin is considered beautiful, youthful, divine. The gods in Egyptian art are depicted without body hair, and to approach the divine ideal, humans must similarly remove these animal markers of earthly existence. Smooth skin also better displays the oils and unguents that will be applied later, making the body gleam like polished stone rather than appearing fuzzy, with fine hairs that trap light unevenly. The medical benefits are equally clear. Lice and fleas find hairless bodies inhospitable environments, unable to lay eggs or hide from searching fingers. In a civilization before antibiotics or understanding of germ theory, anything that reduced parasite load was valuable beyond measure. The infections that could develop from insect bites, particularly in Egypt's heat, where every scratch risked becoming an abscess, killed people regularly. Shaving was preventive medicine disguised as grooming. Historians still argue whether women shaved as completely as men, or maintained some body hair in specific areas. The evidence is conflicting. Tomb paintings and statues show women completely hairless, but these are idealized representations that might not reflect reality. Some medical texts mention treatments for pubic lice specifically in women, suggesting they maintained pubic hair at least sometimes. Other evidence points to full body shaving being standard for both sexes among the upper classes, with working class women perhaps being less thorough for practical reasons related to time and tool access. The spiritual dimension of shaving runs deeper than you might initially assume. Priests and priestesses were required to shave every 3 days as part of their purification rituals before entering temples or performing ceremonies. The Book of the Dead and various temple inscriptions mention shaving as essential preparation for approaching divine presence. Hair was associated with mortality, with the animal nature of human beings, with the decay and corruption of earthly existence. To enter sacred space, you had to remove these markers of your earthly nature, presenting yourself as smooth and clean as a newborn, ready to be received by deities who existed beyond the biological imperatives of hair growth and aging. You watch as the man you've been observing tackles the most challenging areas, behind the knees, between the toes, the small of the back. For these difficult-to-reach zones, wealthy Egyptians employ servants trained in the art of shaving others. These specialists, both male and female, work in households and public bathing establishments, their skilled hands navigating the landscape of the human body with professional efficiency. They know where skin is most delicate, which angles work best for which body parts, how to stretch skin taut for the closest possible shave. Do you remember the last time you shaved somewhere other than your face or legs? The full-body shaving practice that's become more common in modern Western culture through influence from swimming, bodybuilding, and aesthetic preferences, was normal for Egyptians 3 millennia ago. They were the original proponents of the completely hairless body ideal that comes in and out of fashion through history. The tools themselves are worth examining more closely. Bronze razors come in several styles, some curved, some straight, some with teeth like primitive combs designed to cut longer hair before a final smooth shave. Wealthy individuals own multiple razors, selecting the right tool for each body area. The handles are sometimes decorated with carved images, gods, animals, geometric patterns, transforming functional objects into minor works of art. When important people died, razors were buried with them, ensuring they could maintain proper grooming in the afterlife. Shaving accidents were common and sometimes serious. A slip of the blade could create cuts that, in Egypt's bacterial-rich environment, quickly became infected. Medical papyri include multiple treatments for shaving wounds, applications of honey, that miraculous antibacterial, mixtures of herbs, even cauterization with hot bronze for bleeding that wouldn't stop. Some men bore scars from youthful shaving mishaps, marks that told stories of learning this essential skill before full mastery was achieved. For those who couldn't afford bronze razors or preferred alternatives, other hair removal methods existed. Pumice stones could be rubbed against skin to wear away hair through abrasion, painful but effective. Early forms of sugaring, where a paste of sugar, water and lemon juice was spread on skin and then ripped off along with trapped hairs, may have existed, though the evidence is ambiguous. Some wealthy women used a preparation made from crushed bird bones mixed with various substances that dissolved hair chemically. An early depilatory cream that worked through caustic action. Effective but risking chemical burns if left on too long. As midday heat settles over the Nile Valley like a heavy blanket, you find yourself in a merchant's storeroom where sacks of white crystals line the walls, each one carefully sealed and labelled with hieratic script denoting origin and quality. This is natron, perhaps the most versatile and essential substance in all of Egyptian material culture, and today you're discovering its role not in preserving the dead, though that's what it's famous for, but in beautifying the living. The same mineral that prevents corpses from decaying also makes living skin glow with health, and the Egyptians saw no contradiction in this dual purpose. Natron is a naturally occurring mixture of sodium salts that forms when desert lakes evaporate, leaving behind crystalline deposits that can be harvested like ancient snow. The most famous sources are the Wadi Natron, a depression in the western desert about 60 miles from Cairo where lakes dry completely during summer, exposing vast beds of white and yellow crystals that glitter under the relentless sun. Workers harvest it with wooden tools, breaking apart the crust and collecting the purest samples in baskets that are transported throughout Egypt by boat and donkey caravan. You watch as a woman prepares her natron scrub, grinding the crystals in a stone mortar until they are reduced to a powder fine enough to use on skin without causing abrasion that's too harsh. She's careful about the consistency, too coarse, and it will tear skin rather than exfoliate it. Too fine and it loses effectiveness. The sweet spot is somewhere between sand and flour, a grainy texture that provides mechanical exfoliation, while the chemical properties of the natron work their magic. She adds oil to the powder, palm oil today, though other preparations might use castor, moringa, or sesame, creating a paste that she begins working into her arms with circular motions. The sensation must be intense, almost burning, as the alkaline natron reacts with the slightly acidic oils on her skin. It's cleaning at a chemical level, saponifying the fats and dead cells, creating a primitive soap through the same reaction that commercial soap makers would later perfect. Her skin turns pink under the scrubbing, blood rising to the surface as the massage stimulates circulation. But natron does more than exfoliate. Its antimicrobial properties help prevent the skin infections that plague a population living in close quarters in a hot climate. The same preservation qualities that keep corpses from rotting work on a milder scale to prevent bacterial growth on living skin. After a natron scrub, skin is genuinely cleaner than water alone could achieve, scrubbed not just of dirt but of the microbial film that constantly accumulates on human bodies. The alkaline nature of natron also adjusts skin's pH temporarily, creating an environment that's hostile to many of the microorganisms that cause acne, rashes, and other skin conditions. Modern dermatologists might worry about disrupting the skin's acid mantle, but for Egyptians dealing with conditions that could escalate into deadly infections in the days before antibiotics, the trade-off was worthwhile. Better to have slightly disrupted skin chemistry than to develop an abscess that could kill you. Historians still argue whether the same natron used for body scrubs was also used for mummification, or whether different grades existed for different purposes. The chemical composition of natron varies depending on where it's harvested and how it's processed, with some deposits containing more sodium carbonate and others more sodium bicarbonate. It's likely that Egyptians recognized these differences and selected appropriate grades for specific applications. The finest, purer samples for direct skin contact, coarser materials with more impurities for industrial applications. After scrubbing her arms and legs, the woman you're watching moves to her feet, paying particular attention to heels and the balls of her feet, where calluses form from walking barefoot or in simple sandals on hot stone and sand. Here she uses more pressure, really working the natron paste into the thickened skin, grinding away the accumulated dead cells that build up from constant friction. The Egyptian ideal is feet as soft as a baby's, unmarked by the labour of walking, and natron is essential to achieving this aristocratic standard of delicacy. Do you remember the last time you used a foot scrub or pumice stone? The ancient Egyptian natron treatment was more aggressive than most modern exfoliants, closer to a chemical peel than a gentle scrub. It removed not just the surface layer but potentially several layers of dead skin, revealing the fresh, pink skin beneath that would be soft for days afterward, until the cycle of dying and shedding began again. Some preparations mixed natron with other substances to modify its properties. Ground date pits added extra abrasion for particularly tough calluses. Honey mixed in provided moisturizing properties and helped the scrub adhere to skin. Crushed herbs like coriander or cumin added fragrance and potentially some medicinal benefits from their essential oils. Each household had its own recipe, its own ratio of ingredients that had been perfected through generations of use. The frequency of natron scrubbing varied by individual preference and skin sensitivity. Some people used it daily, others weekly, still others only monthly before major festivals or events. Too frequent use could leave skin raw and vulnerable, while too infrequent application meant losing the benefits of regular exfoliation. Finding the right balance was part of learning to care for your particular body, understanding its rhythms and needs. After scrubbing and rinsing, usually with more water than you might expect, as natron needs thorough removal to prevent skin irritation, users would apply oil to their cleaned skin, and here you notice something remarkable. The oil absorbs differently into natron-scrubbed skin, penetrating deeper, spreading more evenly, creating a more complete barrier against moisture loss. The exfoliation has removed the dead cell layer that normally impedes absorption, allowing the oils to work more effectively. So the natron scrub isn't just a treatment in itself, it's a preparation that makes all subsequent treatments more effective. Here's a quirky detail that rarely appears in textbooks. Natron was also used as a primitive deodorant. Applied dry to the armpits, it absorbed moisture and odour, while its antimicrobial properties killed the bacteria that cause body odour in the first place. Some people mixed natron with scented oils to create a paste that was applied to the armpits and allowed to dry, forming a crust that stayed in place for hours, slowly releasing fragrance while controlling sweat and smell. It's the ancient ancestor of modern deodorant, working through essentially similar mechanisms of drying, deodorizing, and providing antibacterial action. The economic importance of natron created entire industries. Harvesters worked seasonal jobs collecting it from dried lake beds. Merchants transported it, graded it, and sold it in markets throughout Egypt. Processors refined it, removing impurities and creating specialized preparations for different purposes. The natron trade employed thousands and generated substantial wealth for those who controlled the sources. When the Greeks and Romans later conquered Egypt, they recognized natron's value immediately and incorporated it into their own beauty and preservation practices. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows as you enter a nobleman's villa, where a servant is preparing something that looks deceptively simple. 3 ceramic bottles filled with golden liquid that catches the light like captured sunshine. These are oils, but not the olive oil you might expect from Mediterranean culture or the vegetable oils of modern cooking. These are almond oil, moringa oil, and castor oil, the holy trinity of Egyptian skincare. Each one pressed from seeds or nuts through labor-intensive processes that transform plant matter into liquid protection against the desert's relentless assault on human skin. You watch as the preparation begins with almonds, dozens of them spread across a flat stone. A worker crushes them methodically with a heavy roller, breaking down the nut meat into a paste that releases its oil slowly as more pressure is applied. The oil that seeps out is collected in a shallow depression carved into the stone, golden and fragrant, smelling of sweetness and earth simultaneously. It takes approximately 50 almonds to produce 1 tablespoon of oil through this cold press method, which explains why almond oil costs significantly more than the animal fats most Egyptians use for daily moisturizing. Almond oil is prized for its lightness. It absorbs into skin quickly without leaving the heavy, greasy residue that beef tallow or sheep fat creates. It's rich in vitamin E, though Egyptians don't have this terminology, knowing only that skin treated regularly with almond oil ages more slowly, retains elasticity longer, and develops fewer of the deep lines that mark the faces of those who work outdoors without protection. Modern scientific analysis confirms what Egyptians learned through observation. Almond oil is indeed one of the most effective natural moisturizers, creating a barrier that prevents water loss, while also delivering fatty acids that support skin health at a cellular level. But the real star of Egyptian skincare is moringa oil, pressed from the seeds of the moringa tree that grows throughout Egypt and Nubia. You watch the process now, workers extracting oil from small winged seeds that look like tiny 3-petaled flowers. The seeds are shelled, crushed, and pressed, yielding an oil that's almost colourless and remarkably stable, resisting rancidity even in Egypt's heat far better than most plant oils. The ancient Egyptian name for moringa translates roughly to oil that never spoils, and this stability makes it the premium carrier oil for perfumes and medicinal preparations. Moringa oil has an almost supernatural ability to sink into skin without residue. You can watch someone apply it liberally to their arms, and within minutes see no visible trace of oil on the surface. It's all been absorbed, pulled into the skin by some mysterious affinity between the oil's molecular structure and human cellular membranes. Modern analysis reveals that moringa oil is high in behenic acid, a fatty acid with an unusual molecular weight that gives it this rapid absorption quality. Cleopatra, according to later Roman sources, used moringa oil exclusively on her face, crediting it with her legendary complexion. The third essential oil is castor oil, thick and viscous, pressed from the beans of the castor plant with difficulty because the beans contain ricin, one of nature's most potent poisons. The oil itself is safe. Ricin remains in the solid waste after pressing, but the extraction process must be done carefully to avoid contact with the toxic components. Castor oil is used primarily for hair, though it also appears in preparations for extremely dry skin, particularly on feet and elbows. You watch a woman apply castor oil to her eyebrows and the hair at her temples, the little bit of natural hair she's allowed to keep visible. The oil is so thick it barely flows, more like honey than oil, and she works it in with her fingers, massaging it into the hair roots and along each strand. The result is hair that gleams with almost unnatural gloss, each strand coated in a protective layer that repels dust and holds moisture. Historians still argue whether castor oil actually promotes hair growth, as Egyptians claimed, or whether it simply prevents breakage and makes hair appear fuller by coating each strand. Modern research is inconclusive, but there's some evidence that ricinoleic acid, the primary fatty acid in castor oil, has anti-inflammatory properties that might promote healthier hair follicles. The application of these oils is a daily ritual, usually performed after bathing when skin is still slightly damp. You watch as the nobleman whose villa you're visiting stands still, while a servant works methodically from feet to head, coating every inch of exposed skin with oil. The servant uses different oils for different areas. Moringa on the face and hands, where quick absorption is important. Almond oil on arms and legs, a mixture of all three on the torso. The application takes nearly half an hour, with special attention paid to areas prone to dryness, or areas that will be most visible: hands, neck, collarbone. Do you remember the last time you spent 30 minutes applying moisturizer? For Egyptians, this daily oiling is non-negotiable, as essential as eating. The combination of sun, wind, low humidity and dust means that unprotected skin becomes damaged quickly, developing the rough, leathery texture that marks the labouring class. Oiled skin stays supple, heals more quickly from minor injuries, and simply looks more attractive, catching light and appearing luminous in ways that dry skin never can. Some preparations mix oils with other ingredients to create specialized treatments. Oil infused with ground lotus flowers for fragrance and symbolic connection to rebirth and beauty. Oil mixed with powdered blue lotus for mild narcotic effects. Yes, they were literally getting high from their skincare. Oil combined with frankincense resin for anti-inflammatory benefits, or with myrrh for antibacterial properties. These compound oils blur the line between cosmetic and medicine once again, treating while beautifying, protecting while perfuming. The sun protection qualities of these oils shouldn't be underestimated. While they provide nowhere near the SPF of modern sunscreens, they do create a physical barrier that reflects some UV radiation and prevents direct sun damage to skin cells. More importantly, the moisturization they provide helps skin repair daily sun damage more effectively, preventing the accumulation of cellular injury that leads to premature aging and skin cancer. Egyptians who oiled regularly did develop less severe sun damage than those who went unprotected, a difference visible in mummies where skin condition reflects lifetime skincare habits. The economics of the oil trade shaped Egyptian society in subtle ways. Almond trees and moringa trees required land and water to cultivate, making oil production part of agricultural planning. The labour involved in harvesting, shelling and pressing meant employment for thousands. The distribution network that moved oil from production sites to markets throughout Egypt required boats, warehouses and merchants. Some temples operated oil presses as part of their economic activities, producing oils both for ritual use and for sale. The finest oils were luxury goods, gifts appropriate for royalty, items valuable enough to be listed in wills and marriage contracts. There's something almost sacred about watching oil being applied, the way hands move across skin with practiced care, the transformation from dull to glowing that happens as the oil catches light. In a civilization that saw the body as a temporary vessel for the eternal soul, proper care of that vessel wasn't vanity. It was respect, preparation, a way of honouring the divine spark that inhabited human flesh. Night has fallen, and you find yourself in a temple workshop where the air is so thick with scent it's almost difficult to breathe. Not unpleasant, but overwhelming in its intensity. Layer upon layer of fragrance combining into something that seems to transcend the physical and approach the divine. Here priestesses are preparing one of the most sacred and expensive beauty treatments in all of Egypt. Face masks made from frankincense and myrrh, those legendary resins that will later be carried to a baby in Bethlehem, but which have already been treasured in Egypt for thousands of years. You watch as a priestess uses a small knife to scrape resin from a chunk of frankincense, the golden amber substance releasing its sharp, piney scent as the blade exposes fresh surfaces. Frankincense comes from boswellia trees that grow in the distant land of Punt, somewhere along the Red Sea coast, modern Somalia or Yemen, though the exact location has been lost to time. Egyptian trading expeditions travelled there every few years, bringing back shipments of these precious resins that were worth more per pound than silver, sometimes even gold. The frankincense pieces are ground in a mortar with a pestle, slowly reduced to powder that glitters faintly in the lamplight. It's mixed with honey first, the two substances combining into a sticky paste, and then thinned with a little water or milk until it reaches a consistency that can be spread across skin without immediately running off. The resulting mixture looks unremarkable, brownish, lumpy, smelling powerfully of pine and sweetness, but it represents wealth that a common farmer might not see in a lifetime of labour. Myrrh is prepared alongside it, the darker reddish-brown resin ground separately, and then mixed with the frankincense in ratios that vary by recipe and purpose. Myrrh comes from commiphora trees, also from Punt and surrounding regions, and it has a more bitter, medicinal scent than frankincense, earthy and slightly smoky. Together the two resins create a scent profile that Egyptians consider the smell of the divine. It's what they believe the gods smell like, and therefore what humans should smell like when preparing to approach sacred spaces or perform important rituals. But these resins do more than smell extraordinary. Modern scientific analysis has revealed that both frankincense and myrrh contain boswellic acids and compounds with genuine anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Frankincense has been shown to promote cell regeneration and improve skin elasticity, while myrrh has antiseptic qualities that help prevent infection. When Egyptians applied these masks and claimed they prevented aging and promoted healing, they weren't engaging in magical thinking. They were using substances that actually work at a biochemical level. You watch as a priestess applies the prepared mask to another woman's face, spreading the thick paste carefully over forehead, cheeks, nose, chin, avoiding the eye area where the mixture's intensity might cause irritation, the mask is applied generously, creating a coating nearly a quarter-inch thick that completely obscures the skin beneath. The woman receiving the treatment sits very still, breathing in the concentrated scent, feeling the paste tighten as it begins to dry, the subtle warming sensation as the resins interact with her skin. The mask stays on for perhaps an hour, during which time the woman does nothing but sit, sometimes with eyes closed in meditation, sometimes chatting quietly with the other priestesses, sometimes simply existing in the scented darkness that the mask creates. There's something profoundly restful about being forced into stillness, about having an excuse to do nothing but breathe and be, about the physical manifestation of self-care that says, I am important enough to spend an hour making myself more beautiful. Historians still argue whether these resin masks were primarily cosmetic or primarily religious. Temple records show them being used in preparation for major festivals and ceremonies, but wealthy secular women also employed them regularly. Some medical papyri list frankincense and myrrh as treatments for skin diseases, suggesting therapeutic applications beyond simple beauty enhancement. The truth, predictably, seems to be that Egyptians saw no meaningful distinction between looking good, feeling good, and being in right relationship with the divine. All three were aspects of Ma'at, the cosmic order that everything should strive to embody. When the mask is finally removed, scraped off with a bronze tool and then the residue washed away with warm water, the transformation is remarkable. The skin beneath glows with the luminosity that seems lit from within, smoothed of fine lines and tight in a way that suggests youth restored. The effect is temporary. Within a day or two, normal skin texture returns. But for those hours immediately after treatment, the woman looks as though she shed years, as though the mask has peeled away not just dead skin cells, but time itself. Do you remember the last time a beauty treatment made you feel genuinely transformed rather than just slightly improved? The ancient Egyptian resin mask was transformative in ways that most modern facials aspire to but rarely achieve. Part of it was surely the quality of the ingredients, genuine frankincense and myrrh, not synthetic fragrances or substitutes. Part was the ritual surrounding it, the time invested, the sacred context, the belief that you are making yourself more godlike. And part was probably the biochemical reality that these substances genuinely affect skin at a cellular level. Some preparations added other ingredients to the base of frankincense and myrrh, ground fenugreek seeds for additional anti-inflammatory effects, crushed lily bulbs for their emollient properties, small amounts of natron for exfoliation, wine for its astringent tannins. Each priestess or beauty specialist had signature recipes, closely guarded secrets that were passed to apprentices with great ceremony and often only on deathbeds, ensuring that valuable knowledge didn't leave the family or temple. The expense of these masks meant they were treatments for special occasions, not daily rituals. A noblewoman might have a frankincense mask done quarterly, before major festivals or important social events. Royalty could afford more frequent applications. Common people might experience it once or twice in their lifetimes, perhaps before a wedding or after recovering from illness, a special indulgence that marked significant life moments. The resins also found their way into other beauty preparations. Ground frankincense mixed with oils created perfumes and skin treatments. Myrrh infused into wine made a drink that was said to improve complexion from within, whether through actual bioactive compounds or through the mild intoxication that made one feel, and therefore appear more relaxed and attractive, is unclear. Both resins appeared in kohl preparations, added in small amounts for fragrance, and to boost the antimicrobial properties of the eye makeup. There's archaeological evidence that some wealthy women were buried with supplies of frankincense and myrrh in their tombs, ensuring they could continue their beauty regimens in the afterlife. This tells us something profound about how important these substances were to Egyptian identity. They weren't luxuries you could abandon after death, but essential elements of selfhood that had to continue eternally. Morning light filters through latticed windows as you enter the private chamber of a young woman in her third pregnancy, watching her prepare a treatment that addresses one of humanity's oldest aesthetic concerns. This silver-pink lines that trace across her belly and breasts like abstract art etched into flesh. These are stretch marks, the visible record of skin stretched beyond its elastic limit by the growing life within, and you're about to discover that ancient Egyptians had sophisticated approaches to preventing and treating them. Recipes preserved in medical papyri, alongside treatments for broken bones and infected wounds. The woman you're observing, her name is Nefertari, though not the famous queen, is mixing ingredients with the careful attention of someone following a recipe that's been passed through her family for generations. She starts with fenugreek seeds, dozens of them, small and golden brown, releasing a smell that's simultaneously maple sweet and bitter when she crushes them in her mortar. Fenugreek is a staple of Egyptian medicine, prescribed for everything from digestive complaints to labour difficulties, but it has a special reputation for maintaining skin elasticity during pregnancy. The crushed fenugreek is mixed with animal fat. She's using hippopotamus fat, which is expensive but considered the most effective for this purpose. Hippopotamus fat has a different molecular structure than cattle or sheep fat, with a higher concentration of certain fatty acids that seem to penetrate human skin more effectively. Whether ancient Egyptians understood the biochemistry or simply noticed that hippo fat worked better than alternatives, the result is the same. A preparation that modern analysis suggests actually has some merit in preventing severe stretch marks. To this base, she adds ground moringa leaves, not the oil this time, but the leaves themselves, dried and powdered to a fine green dust. The leaves contain compounds that promote collagen production, though Nefertari doesn't know about collagen, only that women who use moringa preparations seem to bounce back from pregnancy with fewer permanent marks. She adds a small amount of honey for its healing properties, and to help the mixture hold together, then a few drops of myrrh oil for fragrance, and to boost the preparation's anti-inflammatory effects. The resulting paste is thick and green-tinged, smelling of maple and medicine, and something indefinably organic. Nefertari begins applying it to her swelling belly, working it into her skin with circular motions, paying special attention to the sides where her skin is stretching most rapidly. The massage itself is probably as important as the ingredients. The mechanical stimulation of skin increases blood flow, bringing nutrients and oxygen to cells under strain, potentially helping them maintain integrity as they're forced to expand. Historians still argue whether these stretch mark preparations actually worked, or whether they were mainly psychological comfort for women facing inevitable physical changes. Modern dermatologists note that stretch mark formation is largely determined by genetics, skin type, and the degree of stretching, factors that topical treatments can only marginally affect. However, some studies have found that preparations containing certain plant extracts and oils can reduce the severity of stretch marks if used consistently throughout pregnancy, suggesting that Egyptian women weren't entirely wrong in their belief that these treatments helped. The medical papyri are quite specific about stretch mark prevention. The Kahun Gynecological Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts in existence, includes a recipe almost identical to what you're watching Nefertari prepare, with the addition of ground date pits for extra abrasiveness to help the preparation penetrate more deeply. The Ebers Papyrus recommends a similar treatment but substitutes crocodile fat for hippopotamus fat, another exotic animal fat that was believed to have special properties for skin maintenance. Do you remember the last time you saw a pregnant woman applying belly butter or stretch mark cream? The modern products she was using, cocoa butter, shea butter, vitamin E oil, work through essentially the same mechanism as Nefertari's ancient preparation, providing intensive moisturization to help skin maintain elasticity under extreme stress. The ingredients have changed, but the underlying logic remains identical across 3,000 years. Nefertari applies her treatment twice daily, morning and evening, working the paste into her skin until most of it has been absorbed, leaving only a slight greasy residue that she wipes away with a linen cloth. The routine takes about 15 minutes each time, a significant investment of time and expensive ingredients, but one she considers worthwhile. In a culture that values beauty so highly, returning to your pre-pregnancy appearance as quickly and completely as possible has real social implications, affecting how you're perceived and potentially even your husband's level of attention and affection. Some preparations specifically target breasts, which also swell dramatically during pregnancy and nursing. These recipes often include ingredients believed to maintain firmness, crushed lotus seeds, extract from frankincense resin, oils from specific nuts. Whether they work is dubious from a modern perspective. Breast firmness is primarily determined by internal structures and genetics, not skin treatments, but the care itself demonstrates attention to the body during a time of dramatic change, a refusal to simply accept whatever transformation pregnancy imposes. After childbirth, the treatments intensify. New recipes appear in the medical text specifically for reducing existing stretch marks rather than preventing new ones. These often include more aggressive ingredients, ground pumice for exfoliation, higher concentrations of natron, even small amounts of caustic substances that essentially burn away the top layer of damaged skin, forcing new skin growth. These treatments had to be used carefully, as too much aggression could create scarring worse than the original marks. But in skilled hands, they apparently produce some improvement in appearance. Here's a quirky detail that reveals the social importance of these treatments. Temple priestesses who became pregnant were given leave from certain duties and provided with the finest stretch mark prevention preparations from temple stores, ensuring they could return to their religious roles without visible marks that might suggest they were no longer virgin representatives of goddesses. This tells us that stretch marks weren't just aesthetic concerns. They were markers of status and life experience that carried meaning in Egyptian social structures. The tradition of sharing stretch mark remedies created bonds between women across generations. Mothers taught daughters, experienced women advised first-time mothers, and midwives brought their own recipes to birthing chambers. The knowledge was predominantly female-controlled, passed through women's networks rather than male-dominated medical hierarchies, creating a parallel system of healthcare that addressed specifically female concerns. Some women incorporated ritual elements into their stretch mark treatments, speaking prayers to Taweret, the hippopotamus-headed goddess of childbirth and fertility, while applying preparations. The hippo fat took on additional significance in this context. Using the physical substance of Taweret's animal form was a way of invoking her protective power directly onto the pregnant body. Medicine and magic blended seamlessly once again, the physical treatment enhanced by spiritual intention. The midday sun beats down as you enter the preparation room of a woman about to appear at court. watching her open a small wooden box that contains what looks like white salt crystals mixed with crushed herbs. This is her tooth powder, a preparation she'll use to scrub her teeth into the gleaming whiteness that Egyptian beauty standards demand, despite a diet rich in honey, dates, and other sugars that stain and decay teeth with remarkable efficiency. You're about to witness one of the more uncomfortable beauty rituals of ancient Egypt, one that actually works but at a cost that makes modern dentists wince. She begins by mixing the natron powder with a small amount of crushed mint leaves and ground myrrh, creating a paste with the texture somewhere between sand and wet dirt. The natron is the active ingredient, that miraculous mineral you've encountered before, now serving yet another purpose in the endless Egyptian quest for beauty and cleanliness. She dips a finger into the paste and begins rubbing it directly onto her teeth, working it across the front surfaces in small circles, the gritty texture scraping away the film of breakfast and the yellowish staining that's accumulated since her last cleaning. The sensation must be intensely unpleasant. Natron is alkaline enough to create a sharp chemical taste, slightly burning on the tongue and gums. The gritty texture feels like rubbing your teeth with very fine sandpaper, which is essentially what's happening. The abrasive particles are mechanically removing stained enamel along with the plaque and food residue. She grimaces but continues, because the alternative, yellowed, stained teeth, is socially unacceptable for someone of her status. In a civilization that values gleaming white teeth as markers of beauty and proper hygiene, the discomfort of cleaning is a price worth paying. Some recipes for tooth powder include other abrasive materials beyond natron. Crushed eggshells provide calcium carbonate, which is less harsh than natron but still effective at removing surface stains. Ground pumice appears in some formulations, though it's considered too aggressive for daily use and reserved for stubborn staining. Crushed burnt bread, essentially charcoal, shows up in later Egyptian periods, working through both abrasion and mild chemical bleaching as the carbon absorbs stain molecules. The herbs mixed into the tooth powder serve multiple purposes. Mint provides pleasant flavour that masks the awful taste of natron and leaves breath smelling fresher. Myrrh offers antimicrobial properties, killing the bacteria that cause tooth decay and gum disease. Some recipes include ground coriander, anise, or fennel seeds, all of which freshen breath while potentially providing minor antiseptic benefits. The result is a tooth powder that's simultaneously cleaning, whitening, disinfecting, and flavouring. A multi-purpose preparation that addresses oral hygiene comprehensively if uncomfortably. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians understood the connection between oral bacteria and tooth decay, or whether they simply noticed that certain substances kept mouths healthier without understanding why. The medical papyri describe numerous dental problems and treatments, suggesting they recognized that teeth required active maintenance to prevent painful and disfiguring decay. Some texts specifically mention that regular cleaning with natron powder prevents the worm in teeth, their metaphor for decay, suggesting at least intuitive understanding that something needed to be removed or killed to maintain dental health. After scrubbing all tooth surfaces with the natron paste, the woman rinses her mouth repeatedly with water, spitting into a basin that's held by a servant. The rinsing is crucial. Leaving natron residue on teeth and gums can cause chemical burns and damage to soft tissues. She rinses at least 10 times, swishing vigorously until the water she spits out is clear and the sharp chemical taste has mostly dissipated, leaving only the mint flavour behind. The effectiveness of natron as a teeth whitener is actually quite impressive from a modern perspective. Studies analysing ancient Egyptian mummies have found that elite individuals, those who could afford regular natron treatments often have remarkably white, well-preserved teeth despite their sugar-rich diets. The abrasive action removes surface stains effectively, while the alkaline nature of natron helps neutralize the acids that cause decay, creating a double benefit that genuinely improves oral health and appearance. Do you remember the last time you used whitening toothpaste that made your teeth sensitive? Ancient Egyptian tooth powder was far more aggressive than modern whitening products, essentially abrading away stained enamel to reveal whiter tooth structure beneath. The process worked, but repeated use over years could wear down enamel significantly, eventually exposing the yellowish dentin beneath and creating the opposite of the intended effect: darker teeth that were also more sensitive and prone to decay. Some wealthy Egyptians employed servants specifically trained in dental care, individuals who would clean the teeth of household members using specialized tools along with the natron powder. These dental servants used bronze picks to remove trapped food particles and hardened plaque from between teeth and along the gum line, a procedure that must have been painful but was apparently considered worthwhile for maintaining the perfect smile that society demanded. The frequency of teeth cleaning varied by individual circumstances and preferences. Most elite Egyptians cleaned their teeth at least once daily, usually in the morning after the first meal. Some cleaned twice daily, morning and evening. The most fastidious individuals cleaned after every meal, carrying small containers of tooth powder with them when travelling or attending lengthy banquets. Common people probably cleaned less frequently due to the cost of natron and herbs, though even modest households tried to maintain basic oral hygiene with whatever abrasives and herbs they could afford. Here's a disturbing detail that reveals the dark side of Egyptian dental practices. Some tooth powder recipes included ground cuttlefish bone or crushed snail shells, materials that are extremely abrasive and could seriously damage enamel with regular use. These ultra-aggressive formulations were probably used only occasionally for severe staining or by people desperate to achieve the bright white smile that opened social doors, willing to risk long-term damage for immediate cosmetic improvement. The medical texts also describe treatments for teeth that have already become yellowed beyond what cleaning can fix. These include applications of various substances meant to bleach teeth chemically, vinegar solutions that relied on acid to strip stained enamel, preparations involving crushed minerals that might have provided very mild oxidative bleaching. Whether these actually worked or were mainly desperate measures with placebo effects is unclear, but their existence suggests that yellowed teeth were seen as serious aesthetic problems worthy of aggressive intervention. Tooth care extended to treating dental diseases that modern dentists would recognize. Recipes exist for treating gum inflammation, applications of myrrh and honey directly to swollen gums. Treatments for toothaches included both topical applications and oral medications, some of which contained ingredients that might have had genuine analgesic effects. Abscesses were lanced and drained, then packed with medicinal preparations. The sophistication of Egyptian dental care shouldn't be underestimated, even if their methods were often painful and sometimes counterproductive. As twilight settles over the Nile, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, you find yourself in the chamber of an aging noblewoman who sits before her cosmetic table with an expression that's equal parts determination and hope. She's preparing what Egyptians call a youth restoration treatment, and you're about to witness the moment where beauty practices cross fully into the realm of magic, where the line between medicine and incantation dissolves completely, and where the desperate human desire to halt time's passage manifests in mixtures of oil, prayer, and ingredients chosen as much for their symbolic resonance as their biochemical properties. The woman. She must be in her 50s, ancient by Egyptian standards where life expectancy hovers around 40, is grinding ingredients in a small mortar with movements that have the precision of ritual. She's combining frankincense resin with fresh cypress leaves, adding ground fenugreek and a substance that takes you a moment to identify. Crushed juniper berries imported at great expense from regions far to the north. To this botanical mixture she adds drops of oil, but not just any oil. This is Ben oil, another name for moringa oil, but extracted specifically from seeds harvested during the flood season, which is believed to be particularly potent for anti-aging purposes. As she grinds, she's speaking, not to you, not to any person present, but to the ingredients themselves and to the goddesses who govern beauty and time. You hear fragments, as Isis restored youth to Ra when he grew old, as the scarab emerges renewed from the earth, as the Nile rises young and fresh each year. She's weaving together mythology and medicine, asking divine forces to infuse her preparation with power beyond what chemistry alone can provide. This isn't supplemental to the treatment, it's integral, as essential as the ingredients themselves. The finished paste has a dark green colour and a complex scent. Resinous frankincense, sharp juniper, earthy fenugreek, and something else, something almost astringent from the cypress. She begins applying it to her face, concentrating on the areas where time has left its most visible marks. The creases beside her eyes, the deepening lines from nose to mouth, the softening jawline where skin has begun to sag. She works the paste in with small circular motions, massaging as she applies, the physical manipulation of tissue combining with whatever benefits the ingredients might provide. Modern dermatology would actually find some merit in this preparation. Frankincense contains boswellic acids that genuinely do promote collagen production and reduce inflammation. Fenugreek seeds contain compounds that can improve skin elasticity. The cypress and juniper provide antioxidants that combat free radical damage. The massage itself increases circulation and temporarily plumps skin through increased fluid in tissues. So while the incantations might not do anything, the physical treatment has a rational basis that could produce modest improvements in skin appearance. But the Egyptians want more than modest improvement. They want transformation, reversal, the literal restoration of youth that the prayers invoke. So the preparation includes ingredients chosen purely for symbolic significance. Scarab beetle shells ground to powder, because the scarab represents rebirth and transformation. A hair from a black cat, because cats seem ageless and mysterious. 3 drops of water from the Nile taken at dawn on the first day of the inundation, because the flood represents renewal and the victory of life over death. Historians still argue whether educated Egyptians genuinely believed these magical components added efficacy, or whether they understood the practical ingredients did the real work while the symbolic elements satisfied psychological and spiritual needs. The medical preparer present these recipes without distinguishing between what we'd call active pharmaceutical ingredients and what we'd call magical thinking, suggesting that Egyptians didn't categorize substances the way we do. Everything had both physical and spiritual properties, both chemical effects and sympathetic resonances that extended into realms we can't measure. The mask stays on for what feels like hours but is probably closer to 1, during which time the noblewoman continues her prayers and meditations. She's not just waiting for chemicals to work, she's actively participating in her own transformation, visualizing youth returning, imagining her skin tightening and smoothing, believing with the full force of her will that she can influence the outcome through focused intention. Whether this psychological component actually affects results is a question that modern science is only beginning to explore through research on placebo effects and the mind-body connection. when the mask is finally removed, the ritual isn't complete. The woman applies a sequence of oils, first moringa to seal in moisture, then a mixture of frankincense oil and myrrh for continued treatment overnight, and finally a light application of lotus oil for fragrance. Each application is accompanied by more prayers, more invocations of goddesses and natural forces. The entire process from start to finish has consumed nearly 3 hours, a massive investment of time that demonstrates how seriously aging is taken as something to be fought, resisted, and if possible, reversed. Do you remember the last time you spent 3 hours on skincare? The modern anti-aging industry, with its serums and retinols and laser treatments, operates from the same fundamental denial of aging's inevitability that drove this ancient Egyptian woman to spend her evening grinding beetles and praying to goddesses. The technology has changed, the ingredients have been refined, but the desperate hope remains constant across millennia. The belief that if we just find the right combination, perform the right ritual, we can cheat time. Some anti-wrinkle preparations took weeks to prepare. Certain recipes required ingredients to be mixed and then left in sunlight for specific numbers of days, while prayers were recited over them each dawn and dusk. Others needed to be buried in sand for periods determined by astrological calculations. The most elaborate preparations involved ingredients that had to be collected at specific times under specific conditions. Water from a particular bend in the Nile at the exact moment of sunrise, flowers picked by virgin girls during the full moon, resins harvested only by priests who had completed purification rituals. The expense of these treatments meant they were accessible only to the very wealthy, creating a visible divide between those who could afford to fight aging and those who could not. An aging noblewoman who had access to the best anti-wrinkle preparations might retain a relatively youthful appearance well into her 50s, while a peasant woman of 40 might look decades older, her face carved by sun and hardship into deep lines that no amount of prayer or ointment could erase. Beauty became yet another way that class differences manifested in Egyptian society, written on the skin for everyone to see. Here's a chilling detail. Some recipes for extreme anti-aging treatments included ingredients we'd now recognize as toxic. Preparations containing white lead, which was believed to lighten and tighten skin, actually caused cumulative poisoning that damaged organs and shortened life. The pursuit of prolonged youth through cosmetics sometimes ironically hastened death, though the connection wouldn't have been obvious to Egyptians who saw only that certain preparations produced dramatic immediate results without understanding the long-term consequences. The moon rises full and bright over the Nile as you enter a physician's workroom, where the atmosphere feels decidedly different from the beauty chambers you've been visiting. Here, the cosmetics and preparations are still present, but alongside them lie medical instruments, anatomical drawings on papyrus, and clay vessels marked with hieratic warnings. You're about to confront the shadow side of Egyptian beauty, the slow, invisible price that thousands of years of lead-based cosmetics extracted from the bodies of people who wore them daily, from childhood until death, painting poison onto their eyes every morning without ever suspecting the damage accumulating in their bones, their blood, their brains. The physician you're observing, an older man whose own eyes are lined with the traditional kohl that might be slowly killing him, is examining a young woman who has come to him with complaints that have become increasingly common in his practice. She describes persistent headaches that throb behind her eyes, a metallic taste in her mouth that never quite goes away, episodes of abdominal pain that double her over without warning, and a tremor in her hands that makes fine work difficult. She's 23 years old. She's been wearing coal daily since she was 5. She's suffering from chronic lead poisoning, though neither she nor the physician understands it in those terms. The physician examines her eyes, noting the slight greyish tint to her gums, what modern doctors would recognise as a lead line, one of the telltale signs of heavy metal accumulation. He presses on her abdomen, feeling the areas of tenderness. He asks about her appetite, her sleep, whether she's noticed changes in her monthly bleeding. He's seen these symptoms before, many times, especially in women of the cosmetic-using classes who apply coal more heavily and more frequently than men. He doesn't know what causes the cluster of symptoms, but he's observed that they tend to appear in people who use certain coal preparations more than others. Here's what the Egyptian physician doesn't know, but what modern toxicology has revealed. Lead is a cumulative poison that the body stores rather than efficiently eliminates. Every application of lead-based coal deposits small amounts of lead into the bloodstream through the thin mucous membranes around the eyes. The conjunctiva is highly vascular, meaning it has many blood vessels close to the surface, making it an efficient route for chemical absorption. Day after day, year after year, lead accumulates in bones, teeth, organs, and brain tissue, slowly reaching levels that interfere with fundamental biological processes. Lead disrupts enzyme function throughout the body. It interferes with hemoglobin synthesis, causing anemia and fatigue. It damages the kidney's ability to filter waste products from blood. Most insidiously, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and damages neural tissue, causing cognitive impairment, personality changes, and in severe cases seizures and encephalopathy. Children are especially vulnerable. Lead exposure during development can permanently reduce intelligence and create behavioral problems that persist throughout life. Every Egyptian child with coal-rimmed eyes playing in a noble's garden is slowly poisoning their developing brain. But the terrible paradox is that the lead in coal also provides genuine benefits, as you learned earlier in this journey. The lead compounds stimulate immune responses that protect against eye infections. So Egyptians face an impossible trade-off. Use coal and suffer chronic poisoning but avoid the acute infections that could blind or kill, or forgo coal and face immediate disease risk while preserving long-term health. In an era before antibiotics, before sterile technique, before even basic understanding of germ theory, the immediate threat of infection probably outweighs the distant, invisible threat of chronic heavy metal toxicity. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians recognized any connection between coal use and health problems. Some scholars point to passages in medical papyri that warn against excessive use of certain cosmetics, suggesting some awareness of toxicity. Others note that these warnings are vague and might refer to skin irritation rather than systemic poisoning. The fact that coal use continued unchanged for thousands of years, despite the health costs, suggests that either Egyptians didn't make the connection, or they considered the benefits worth the price. The physician treats his patient with what he knows: herbs to ease her headaches, preparations to settle her stomach, amulets inscribed with prayers for healing. None of these address the root cause because he can't see it. Lead poisoning is invisible until it becomes severe, and even then its symptoms mimic so many other conditions that identifying the true culprit requires knowledge of toxicology that won't exist for millennia. The woman will leave his office with temporary relief but no cure, returning to her daily coal application because not wearing it is socially unthinkable, continuing to poison herself because beauty and disease protection both demand it. Do you remember learning about lead paint in old houses, lead in gasoline, lead in drinking water from old pipes? the horror we feel at populations unknowingly poisoned by substances they encountered daily. Ancient Egyptians lived this reality for 3,000 years, generations upon generations painting lead onto their faces, absorbing it into their bodies, passing it through breast milk to nursing infants, never knowing that their most essential cosmetic was slowly destroying them from within. Archaeological evidence from Egyptian mummies supports this grim picture. Analysis of bone and tissue samples shows elevated lead levels in many mummies, especially those from higher social classes who could afford the purest, most lead-rich coal preparations. Some mummies show lead concentrations high enough that the individuals must have suffered significant symptoms during life: headaches, cognitive impairment, possibly even seizures and paralysis. The beautiful, elaborately made-up bodies preserved in tombs are also records of chronic heavy metal poisoning, their bones containing the evidence of beauty's terrible cost. Not all coal was equally dangerous. Preparations made primarily from carbon-based soot, lamp black or charcoal, contained minimal lead and posed little toxicity risk. But these produced a less intense black colour and lacked the medicinal benefits of lead-based formulations, making them less desirable. The most prized coal, the kind that cost the most and was favoured by those who could afford it, was precisely the kind with the highest lead content and therefore the highest toxicity. Wealth could buy better beauty, but it also bought more poison. Some women suffered acute lead poisoning from particularly concentrated preparations or from accidentally ingesting large amounts. Children who got into cosmetic pots and ate the contents, women who licked their fingers after applying coal, mistakes in preparation that created dangerous concentrations. Acute poisoning produces dramatic symptoms: severe abdominal pain, vomiting, seizures, and potentially death. The medical papyri describe cases that might represent acute lead toxicity, though the language is ambiguous and could refer to various conditions. Here's perhaps the cruelest irony. Lead also crosses the placental barrier, meaning pregnant women wearing coal were exposing their fetuses to heavy metal poisoning that could affect development. The same women carefully applying stretch mark prevention creams were simultaneously dosing their unborn children with a neurotoxin. The babies born with coal immediately applied to their eyes for protection were being poisoned from their first day of life, starting an accumulation of lead that would continue until death. The cycle of seasons turns one final time, and you find yourself in a tomb chapel as the last rays of sunset illuminate wall paintings that glow with colours that have survived millennia in the dry darkness. You're watching the final preparations of a body, not for life, but for the eternity that Egyptians believed followed death. And you're discovering that beauty rituals don't end when breathing stops. Instead, they transform, becoming even more elaborate, more carefully executed, because the appearance you carry into the afterlife is the appearance you'll maintain forever in the presence of gods and the blessed dead. The embalmers working on this body, a woman who died at 45, wealthy enough to afford the full 70-day mummification process, have completed the preservation work. The organs have been removed and stored in canopic jars. The body has been packed in natron for 40 days to draw out all moisture, and now comes the cosmetic restoration that will make her beautiful for eternity. You watch as they begin with her face, applying the same coal to her desiccated eyelids that she wore in life, carefully lining eyes that will never again open, but which must still be perfect, still protective, still announcing her status to whatever beings she encounters in the realm beyond death. The embalmers paint her lips with red ochre mixed with oils that have been specially prepared to resist decay. They apply henna to her fingernails and toenails, the familiar orange-red stain that marks her as a woman of refinement even in death. They rub her entire body with oils and unguents, moringa oil primarily, for its extraordinary stability and resistance to rancidity, but also frankincense and myrrh oils that serve double duty as preservatives and perfumes. The body gleams under their ministrations, taking on a sheen that almost suggests life, as if she might sit up at any moment and ask for her wig. The wig. Of course she'll need her wig, and not just any wig, but her finest one, the elaborate construction of human hair and gold thread that she wore to festivals and ceremonies. It's brought out from storage and placed on her head, carefully arranged so that every braid falls correctly, every curl maintains its shape. Without this wig, she would be improperly dressed for the afterlife, as naked and vulnerable as if she wore no clothing. The wig is secured with additional resin, ensuring it won't shift during the wrapping process or in the long centuries that follow. But beauty and death requires more than just cosmetics on the body. It requires provision for maintaining beauty throughout eternity. You watch as servants pack a wooden cosmetic chest with everything the deceased will need. Pots of coal and pallets for grinding it, containers of ochre for cheeks and lips, bottles of precious oils, natron for bathing and tooth cleaning, razors for shaving, mirrors for checking her appearance. These aren't symbolic objects or models. They're real, functional items, the same ones she used in life, because the Egyptians believe she'll actually need them in the afterlife. The tomb walls around you are painted with scenes of beauty rituals, servants applying makeup to the deceased, offering oils and unguents, holding mirrors while she admires her eternal reflection. These aren't just decorative images, but magical provisions, ensuring that even if the physical cosmetics decay or are stolen by tomb robbers, the depicted servants will continue their duties through the power of art and hieroglyphic spells. The painted cosmetic table is as real as the wooden one, the illustrated oils as effective as the bottled ones, because in Egyptian understanding, representation and reality are not as separate as modern minds assume. Historians still argue whether Egyptians genuinely believed the dead needed to maintain their appearance, or whether burial cosmetics were primarily for the benefit of the living, a final honour paid to the deceased before they were sealed away forever. The elaborate care taken, the enormous expense invested in these preparations, and the consistency of the practice across 3,000 years all suggest genuine belief that beauty mattered beyond death, that the gods and blessed ancestors would judge you partly on your appearance, that arriving in the afterlife unkempt and unadorned would be as shameful as appearing that way at a royal banquet. Some tombs contain multiple sets of cosmetics, ensuring the deceased has backup supplies if anything runs out. Wealthy individuals might be buried with enough coal to line their eyes daily for years, enough oil to moisturize skin indefinitely, enough natron to bathe for eternity. Its conspicuous consumption taken to its ultimate expression, not just having more than you need in life, but having more than you need forever, displaying wealth that extends beyond the boundaries of mortal existence. Do you remember visiting a grave and noticing how carefully people tend to the appearance of their loved ones' final resting places? Fresh flowers, cleaned stones, maintained grounds. The Egyptian impulse was similar but more direct. Instead of beautifying the space, they beautified the body itself, ensuring that the person they loved would be beautiful forever in whatever realm they now inhabited. It's touching and slightly heartbreaking, this refusal to accept that death ends beauty, this insistence that appearance matters even when no living eyes will see. The painted scenes on tomb walls show the deceased receiving beauty treatments in the afterlife, sitting while servants apply coal, relaxing while attendants rub oil into skin, admiring their reflection in mirrors held by the gods themselves. These scenes promise that the hierarchy of beauty and the rituals of grooming continue beyond death, that the afterlife isn't some formless spiritual existence, but a place where bodies matter, where appearance counts, where looking good is still worth the effort it requires. There's archaeological evidence that some tombs were reopened after burial to refresh the deceased's cosmetics, suggesting that family members or priests believed periodic maintenance was necessary. These re-entries are controversial among scholars. Were they religious maintenance or simply tomb robbery disguised as piety? But some cases show clear evidence of respectful treatment, with cosmetics carefully reapplied and offerings renewed, supporting the idea that the dead's beauty was an ongoing concern for the living. The final cosmetic act you witness is perhaps the strangest. The embalmers paint the mummy's wrappings with ochre and other pigments, creating decorative patterns but also effectively applying makeup to the outside of the bandages as well as the skin beneath. It's layers upon layers of beauty preparation, ensuring that no matter what happens, whether the wrappings are removed, whether the body is disturbed, whether tomb robbers strip away outer coverings, some level of cosmetic enhancement remains, some evidence of care and status persists. As the tomb is sealed and darkness claims the painted walls, the cosmetics, the carefully preserved and beautified body, you're left with a profound realization. The Egyptian relationship with beauty was never casual or superficial. It was existential, religious, a fundamental aspect of human identity that transcended the boundary between life and death. The chilling beauty secrets you've witnessed tonight weren't just about looking good. They were about being good, about maintaining cosmic order, about preserving self in a universe that constantly threatened to dissolve identity into chaos and oblivion. The woman in the tomb will lie in darkness for millennia, her coal-lined eyes closed forever, her hennaed fingers still, her oil-gleaming skin gradually drying despite all preservation efforts. But in Egyptian belief, somewhere in another realm of existence, she walks beautiful and perfect, her cosmetics never fading, her appearance eternally maintained, forever young and forever lovely, in the presence of gods who recognize and reward those who honored beauty in life and carried it beyond death into eternity. The practices you've witnessed tonight, some beneficial, some harmful, some simply strange, all spring from this deep Egyptian conviction that appearance matters absolutely, that beauty is worth any price, any effort, any risk. From the lead-poison coal that protected and destroyed simultaneously, to the laboriously pressed oils that genuinely nourished skin, to the perfume cones that may or may not have actually existed, to the elaborate wigs that cost fortunes, to the mummification cosmetics that promised eternal loveliness. All of it testifies to humanity's refusal to accept bodies as merely functional, to our insistence on transformation, on improvement, on the creation of ideal selves that bridge the gap between mortal flesh and divine perfection. The moon has completed its journey across the sky, and dawn approaches with the gentleness of a whisper, light seeping into the darkness so gradually you barely notice the transition from night to day. Your journey through the cosmetic chambers and beauty rituals of ancient Egypt draws to a close, and you find yourself drifting, thoughts becoming softer, more distant, as if you're watching them from very far away. Perhaps you're thinking about the women whose lives you've glimpsed. Mutemwia grinding her coal in the early morning, Nefertari protecting her growing belly with fragrant paste, the aging noblewoman praying over her anti-wrinkle preparation, the physician's patient slowly accumulating lead in her beautiful coal-rimmed eyes, They lived 3,000 years ago, yet their desires, their fears, their desperate hope that the right mixture might make them beautiful enough, young enough, perfect enough, these feel startlingly familiar, don't they? We've changed so little, really. We still grind and mix and apply, still chase beauty despite costs we half understand, still believe that transformation is possible if we just find the right formula. The beauty secrets aren't chilling because they're ancient or foreign, but because they're so recognizably human. The willingness to endure discomfort, to spend fortunes, even to poison ourselves slowly if it means being beautiful today. The Egyptians weren't strange or primitive in their beauty obsessions. They were us, separated by time but united by the universal human conviction that appearance matters, that beauty is power, that we can improve upon nature's design if we're clever enough and persistent enough and willing enough to pay whatever price beauty demands. Let the images fade now, the gleam of bronze mirrors, the scent of frankincense and myrrh, the feel of natron scrubbing skin clean and raw, the impossible weight of perfume cones balanced on elaborate wigs. Let them all drift away like smoke from an oil lamp dissipating into darkness, becoming memory, becoming dream. The Nile still flows, the sun still rises over the desert, the ancient cosmetic pots sit in museums behind glass, and you are drifting, sinking, settling into sleep as soft as milk bath, as warm as scented oil, as peaceful as the darkness of a sealed tomb where a beautiful woman rests eternal, her makeup perfect, her beauty preserved forever in the dry Egyptian air. Sleep now. Dream of kohl and henna, of oils and unguents, of beauty that transcends time and death. Dream of ancient hands creating potions and pastes, of women who lived and loved and fought against aging, and time with every tool available to them. Dream yourself beautiful, protected, eternal, sweet dreams.